Hello and welcome to another episode of the Edit Undo podcast. You know, it's always a little bit strange coming back onto things. It's been a while. It feels like it's been a while since we've recorded an episode, but we published one yesterday. But it's good to be back to something that's familiar. I think in my personal life, things are a little bit crazy right now. I resigned from my job, so there's obviously all of those interesting things. So it's good to do something that's somewhat certain and familiar. But there's something that's not so familiar today, and that is our guest, Jan Oberholzer. I hope I said that right.
You said perfectly.
But welcome to the show. It's really, really, really good to have you.
Welcome.
Thanks so much.
Alfie, that was such a punny intro there, and you felt so unprepared. That's perfect.
Yeah, I guess I've been kind of needing to talk to people off the cuff so much more now because I am trying to do my own thing, but I'm kind of like in the groove of that. But nice. This is not about me. This is not about me. Everybody is here to hear about your journey. Jan, so I think, on our podcast, we usually try to bring a lot of the people in our network, but I think Steph and I have kind of gotten to the point where we're kind of exhausting the people that we know that are very interesting. Well, we know a lot of other interesting people. I think the ones that are willing to talk to us, those are the ones that are exhausted. So it's good to have you on the show, and it'll be cool to walk through your journey along with the audience and hear how you got to where you are today, and more importantly, how you're thinking about your next few steps in your journey. And maybe we can start a little bit with the superhero origin story. Maybe we can talk a little bit about how you trained, and then we can dive into how your career has developed.
Cool. So I studied at City Varsity. Doing a 2-year degree. I think the third year was just doing Maya, which is the 3D software, which I kind of had no interest in doing. So I did that, and then I actually went to do a second year or a first year somewhere else, because the software that I was trying to learn to land my first job wasn't being taught at City Varsity. So yeah, that's kind of training-wise where it was, doing everything from drawing on paper, doing stop motion, a little bit of 3D, and just going, I really like drawing, and I'm just going to stick to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe before you step forward, one question that I do have is at that point in time, especially around your first couple of years in varsity, I almost put people into kind of like two groups. There are the people who came in knowing what they wanted to do and kind of do that and figure themselves out. And then there are the people who kind of stumbled into a degree and eventually stumble out. And how did you find your experience during your training? Were you very certain about what you're trying to achieve?
Not really. I kind of went from the idea that I like I like art and I like movies, and animation was kind of the middle ground of those two. So it's you kind of just go I guess I'll do that, because growing up I had a lot of struggling artists around me, so I was I don't know if I want to be doing that for the rest of my life. So I'd rather do something different.
Okay, that's interesting. So you mentioned that you were kind of more interested in the kind of the drawing side of things. Yeah. How did it sort of evolve once you sort of moved to the new space that had the software that you were interested in exploring?
Well, it took a while, because the thing they don't teach you as a student, you kind of work on all your own work. That's really fun and satisfying, and also, if you make a blunder, that's 100% on you, and the next thing you just know what you need to work on. But working in a more studio environment, you sometimes just animate. You don't draw the character. You don't plan what's going to happen. You're just there to execute. So in my first couple of years, it was kind of what I wanted to be doing was set aside. It was, okay, you just need to animate. Yeah. That's your kind of job. That's why we hired you. We didn't hire you. So it's kind of funny how that worked out.
That's interesting. So you are actually really keen to kind of do the character development, figure out a bit of the story and the narrative as well. That's kind of where your passion is also lying.
Yeah. So, I mean, it took a while for me to understand why I wasn't super stoked at work.
Okay, yeah.
Especially when you're like a young 20-year-old figuring out life as well. So, but yeah, I mean, from there, I was able to take the necessary steps to kind of go freelance at where I'm now. And I'm kind of lucky because this year, magically, my intention was to do more illustration, and it's kind of getting up to that 70% is animation, 30% is illustration. So
that's crazy.
Wow. So
yeah, it's a slow growth, but I mean, it's a growth. The year is still young.
That's true.
I really want to get into kind of how you made that happen. If there was a strategy behind it, you know, some people actively scout clients that will make them do the work that they want to do, or they'll do some mock projects. Or like, was that intentional, or do you feel like it was just pure luck?
I think it came down to me stopping posting animation on my Instagram.
Oh, okay.
Because it's always that thing where I lean to something where I'm not satisfied in. So during my day job, I was animating all the time. So I would get home and then I want to draw. So I started illustrating more and more. And even like the past couple of years freelancing, it's I'm putting out more illustration than I'm putting out animation. So I think it's definitely leaning towards that. It wasn't planned necessarily. It's just like, that's what I've been doing. It's working out that way.
Okay.
Naturally kind of just evolved into doing what you actually wanted to be doing more of, which is great.
Yeah. I mean,
I think it'll be cool to dive into a little bit more detail on that as the conversation develops. I think there's something to be said about how you present yourself to the world. And it's like, it's easy to think that your Instagram post is just a post that you're posting on Instagram, but it's also what people see when they first search you on Instagram. And these days, like, Instagram is the yellow pages of like 2023. So in a sense, there's a conversation to be had about that. But before we get there, so you're in this sort of studio sort of environment. You're still pretty young. You're figuring out where you are. And you're getting to animate, which is cool, but it's not fulfilling you. So can you talk a little bit about when you eventually came to the realization that this is actually not what you want? How did you start to actually make those next few steps?
So I can backtrack that a little bit. So I was working for a studio at a certain point where my job was just to do the final thing. That's just animate, nothing else. And I kind of had a tiff with someone. And the next day I broke both my arms running Fortran. And kind of being in that situation, taking off 6 weeks of work, being pretty sedated with pain medication, kind of made me realize that, yes, there's stuff outside of work, like your personal relationships, but also you kind of want to do... You want to spend your time doing what you really love versus just doing it every day. So after I kind of healed up, I started putting in the effort that I was saying to people I was putting in, but not really putting in behind the scenes. I think it's kind of that moment where you
get you.
So yeah.
Sure. Wow. So that was like a turning point for you. It makes me think of, it sounds so cynical when I speak to people sometimes about heartbreak, but because I've often said, I really wish heartbreak on some people. And that's just present. I just see, this is the reaction I get.
It's character development. That's exactly what it is.
It really, when you feel very isolated, very incapable, very immobilized in your life, whether that shows up as being physically immobilized because you broke your two arms, or you feel isolated because your extension of your identity has been lost because of a partner, not necessarily a job. It brings about so much growth because of the thinking and the actual work that you have to put in to get through that. So it's kind of just made me think of that now. And it seems like that's kind of the what you also experienced. It was a big turning point or pivoting point for you.
No, definitely. You kind of, moments like that, when they happen, they suck. But after that,
of course,
you tend to reap benefits. So.
I can imagine not having one arm and being sedated for so long. That definitely sucks. Wow. I'm very curious. Your motor ability must have been massively affected. And you really enjoyed drawing. Was there like a rehab? Were you scared? Like, what was the whole experience post or recovery?
My right arm, I'm a righty. So I broke my arm in the humerus socket.
Sure.
So basically, I lost all mobility for 6 weeks in that. And then it's something stupid like the reaching for a cupboard and pulling it. It's like you don't have the strength, because as a baby, you're rolling around and discovering your limbs, building muscle immediately. And having that kind of being put aside for 6 weeks, you lose all that muscle mass. You have to kind of start from scratch.
Yeah.
So I kind of got into a catch-22 where it's like, cool, you really want to draw, but there's like a time limit on it. It's like, if you recover, you might not have a very long career because there's going to be a point where you hurt your arm. And that kind of started happening, and I had to push aside the work that I was really passionate of. And just say, I don't want to do that. So, but then it's like, for the first time, I actually started looking at my physical health, and within a couple of months, I could feel like those strains from drawing were no longer there, because I actually did the proper rehab. When I just broke it, I just continued with life instead of doing the proper work. So,
Nothing like a goal to get you to do the things that the doctor tells you to do.
I was about to say, right? I can imagine if the motivation, that was motivation enough to actually do those silly rehab exercises just because you knew the thing you were passionate about was at stake. So,
and I think, it's somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but I think there's something profound to be said about that, because when we're talking about you sort of recovering after 6 weeks and then going to do something that you love, I think the 6 weeks kind of makes it seem like it kind of was just a tiny blip in a long career and all of that. But I think there's a deeper thing to be learned from that, and that is using your goals to get you to do the things that you want to do. Like when you put things that you want in front of you, you're willing to work that much harder because you actually want to achieve them. Instead of being forced.
There's a good way of looking at it as well. Like the lead singer, he was in Black Flag, Henry Rollins. He used to work as a manager at the Haagen-Dazs. So he always worked really hard at his band because he didn't want to go back to working at a Haagen-Dazs.
Put yourself in a shit situation.
Yeah, like I kind of worked in a little bit of retail, like in the early years, and like at like Amazon, which is a very weird experience. But you kind of go like, I don't want to go back to those days, so you kind of just have to go forward.
Yeah.
So I think there's also the goal of not failing on top of everything else.
No, that's very true, and that's I think another really important point. I'm going to go on a little bit of a side tangent here, on a story that I heard some time back, and it was by I think it was Jaak Panksepp, but I can't remember. So he's a evolutionary biologist, a psychologist, something like that. But what he was basically doing is measuring. Yes, one of those ists. But what he was doing is measuring into like motivation. He was measuring motivation, and so there were basically two motivational systems in people: the fight or flight or flight response, which is a protective one. But then there's also the predatory one, like consuming or hunting or whatever. So those are like the two motivation systems: getting something you want and getting something that you don't. And one of the things that they realize is like people want to avoid pain more than they want to get things. So we're more scared of things than we are like trying to achieve things. But what is the best is if you're running away from something that you're scared of and you're running towards something that you want. You get double the motivation. And I think there's something to be said for that, especially for people who maybe have got habits that kind of get them into strange situations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, definitely.
So it's sort of interesting to see how that kind of like shows up even in our, like it's seen in rats, it's seen in humans. The idea of kind of like planning your experiences to leverage your motivations is surprisingly effective.
No, definitely. I think there's also that thing of you just kind of living in a society, especially in South Africa, where you have to push forward. So if you're going to push forward, you might as well push for what you want. Otherwise, you're just going to be an unhappy person in a bar, which...
And your job's still going to be hard. That's the thing that always like that's the thing that always kills me. It's like I'd be happy to do a job if the job was super easy and boring, because then like you're just basically on holiday forever. But if your job is already going to be hard and somebody is already going to be telling you to do shit, like it may as well be things that you want to do.
That makes no sense. Bored forever does not sound like a holiday to me. Okay.
Well,
I do want to go. I do want to go back. We kind of went on a little tangent, which is totally okay. But I want to go back to we were on the timeline, and you were telling us about your recovery. Firstly, did they allow you to keep your job? Did you change employers? What happened from when you were in that recovery?
I had a really cool boss at the time, which was just like, it's fine, everything will be cool. And I have no recollection of what I said to him during the phone call. It's just like something happened to me, or I broke both of my arms. I'm not coming in 6 weeks. And then I kind of expected him to say, dude, okay, we have to have a chat on Monday. And he just said, dude, go recover. We'll see you in 6 weeks. Which was cool. Really cool. But what sucked behind the whole thing was I kind of lost all my sick leave and holidays for the time I took off. So coming back from that and having this motivation that you don't want to do what you're currently doing was also a bit of a weird one, because you're sitting and there's nothing to leverage. Because in a normal situation, you can quit your job and or you leave or something. This was a situation of me going like, I don't want to work here necessarily anymore, and also I have no leverage. So whatever happens, I'm going to owe. Yeah, so I knew I was going to owe them whatever I did, and I just decided, well, I'm going to keep going, because I can see there's more opportunity in what I want to do versus where I was. And it ended up with me owing them like, I think 2 weeks of sick leave or something like that I was able to work down due to them being on a tight deadline. I was just like, I'll come in weekends if we can crush some of those numbers down. But yeah.
Okay.
Sure. It does hurt me a little bit, and maybe it's now because I'm working for a Dutch company, but the fact that in South Africa, something really terrible happened to you.
Yeah.
And the fact that you had to work back the sick leave because an accident that you couldn't foresee.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just it doesn't feel just. Doesn't sit well with me, but that's a different conversation.
Yeah. It's also, I think, if you're in a country where trains run on time, that's a different story.
This is also very true.
But the time this happened, basically, if you missed your train, it either showed up 2 hours later or it didn't show up. So you kind of never guaranteed that I would get into work the time I need to get there. And it's like, you can only have that conversation so many times before people really get onto your back and say, well, you need to change something.
Sure.
That's crazy. Yeah, and that's the thing. I think after you have an experience like you did, it forces you to reevaluate things that you typically take for granted.
Yeah.
Like, for example, your commute. It's like your commute, it's very easy for that to almost become a white noise in your day. But when you suddenly have to think about, like, you know, how you're moving your arms when you're in a train versus like all of these things, it makes you reevaluate all of those things. And it seems, at least to me, looking from the outside in, that it almost seems like that reevaluation kind of helped you get to where it is that you wanted to go.
In darkness. It's going to move the lights a bit more on me. I think it made me a lot more grateful in the beginning, which is something.
Only in the beginning?
Life happens. And then you forget about how grateful you were. Like, just being able to drive my car again was like such an amazing experience after being driven around by people and like drinking coffee through a straw, that kind of stuff. So then you're like grateful for a while, and then life just continues and you forget like where you were.
No, that is true. Okay, so you know, we've been alluding to it for pretty much since the beginning of the conversation. Let's maybe let everybody know, like, kind of clearly. So what is it exactly that you do? What did this long journey kind of lead to, and where are you right now?
So I'm in the fortunate position where I worked for a really cool studio for a while, and I built a really cool portfolio, and I was able to, after COVID happened, and everyone got used to working from home, I kind of fell in love with the idea. That's why I'm home right now. And yeah, the studio I work with was like, you guys need to come back to work. And I was like, I'm not coming back to the office. I'm going to go freelance. And yeah, I still have a very good relationship with them, but with overseas companies being like, well, this dude is either going to sit in our country or he's going to be overseas. Doesn't matter. He's not going to be here. It kind of opened a lot of doors where I think it wasn't before. You had to be phenomenally good, I think, in the past if you wanted to work with overseas companies as a freelancer, because essentially you're a hired gun. And yeah, I think it was just looking at the environment around me and saying, well, I can stay where I am, or I can once again jump ship and see what the next adventure is. And I'm lucky to say I'm doing, like I said earlier, 70% animation and 30% illustration at the moment. Just relaunched my website, so I think there's a lot of bugs in there, but I hope people look past it.
I'm sure they definitely will, and we'll include that link in the show notes. And hopefully, you know, before we close out the conversation, we can maybe do a deep dive on one of the pieces on your website.
Yeah, definitely.
But maybe one of the things that I might be interesting before we talk about one of the projects that you do that you've done. Can we maybe talk a little bit about the almost like the type of work that you do? So if for example, you know, we had a couple of people that might be some of your future potential clients that are interested in what you're doing. Maybe could you talk a little bit towards what kind of work you enjoy doing and what you've done?
So I do a lot of everything except motion graphics.
What does that mean though? Because even for me, who's in the same industry as you, for me, what you kind of do, I would classify as motion graphics. So maybe that's just my ignorance.
So coming from the more traditional animation background, I would say, where you get trained to do a series like The Simpsons or something like that. Working in motion, a lot of characters don't really have motivation for doing the stuff they do. Or even for things to move, there's no motivation. If it looks cool, it looks cool and people do it.
Okay.
So that's why I'm not that person. I struggle immensely when it comes to just move stuff for the sake of moving it. There's always, but why is this person moving this way? Why is he thinking this way? Why is he looking at this product? So all those kind of questions are always in my head. And if I don't get answers, that's where my brain kind of clutches up. That's why I can't do motion graphics. But so I worked on a fair amount of explainer videos purely as a character animator. So someone usually lacks either the capacity in their studio or the skill set to actually do character animation. So they just contact me for that. Or I do a fair amount of short adverts, I would say. Shorter, like the 15-second ones. There's a fair amount of 30-second ones that I've worked on. I've done a lot of web stuff, which is very fun. Instead of, unless you're doing Lottie files, which is not fun because then half of the plugins and stuff that you can do doesn't work. So it makes life a bit more difficult. And on the illustration side, it's mostly like for explainer videos, some web stuff, and also social media posts. Because a lot of our industry, people get work from what they post online. So I've had a couple of studios that approach me and say, can you do a social post about this? And the one thing we did a while ago was Stranger Things, when that just came out, the new season.
Oh, wow.
So I had got to design all the characters in the style.
That's crazy.
And I mean, it got a lot of views, which was really nice. But I just feel there's certain projects that I want, and once people start saying you can imitate other people, not the style, but like the facial features and stuff like that, you can capture that. Then everyone's like, can you draw me? Which is usually the first thing. If anyone draws anything, it's like, can you draw me? And it's like,
are you serious? That was so unexpected. Not expect that. Wow.
So it's a difficult thing because a lot of people will say work is work, but I've learned the hard way that sometimes eating noodles is fine. If you know you should not be doing it, don't do it. Eating noodles is 100% fine.
Yeah.
No,
because usually if you say yes to the wrong project, the right project is around the corner and you don't have the capacity.
Yeah.
So you're just going to hate your life and the project you're on. So in the end, it's not worth doing for you and the client.
Looking at your work, both animation and illustration, for those of you listening and not watching the video, you can find the link in the show notes. You definitely specialize in human figures. Like every single piece has a human figure, and that is for sure, which I find fascinating because that is, I would say, not very easy. But it's also, I just really love your style.
Thank you. I think it's also part of fighting to grow up. Because I remember playing with toys, action figures when I was young. So working in After Effects is essentially you playing with the action figure and making up what they need to do. I don't know, I've never been that kid that we all grew up with him that sit in school and just draws cars and notebooks. I was not that child. I always drew people instead because I think we're kind of fascinating creatures, but for good and bad reasons. But yeah, my biggest thing at the moment, I'm drawn to projects that have a little bit of heart in them, where it's like you have human emotion instead of just selling a product.
Can you share one of these projects? Are they on here that I can maybe find one and then you can walk us through one?
Unfortunately, on my website, there's not really a lot. The Yes Way ones are cool. I think there's, if you go to the...
We can go to your Instagram as well, if you want me to go there instead.
No, that's fine. The sixth video on the list, there is... If you scroll down to the second video, I think, or the third one. So just him opening the door for it. It's that kind of thing where it's like those little moments that really resonate with people. I recently, unfortunately, myself and the studio I worked with can't show it at the moment, but we did an advert for a company selling strollers and stuff and car seats for babies. And the advert was just so nice because every shot there was the husband and wife interacting. It's like hugging each other or like going to view the pram together. And there's a moment of him putting his hand on his shoulder. It's like those kind of things where it's baked in. That's the story. It's yes, it's like you're selling a product, but at the end of the day, it's like their narrative is equally important than the product.
That's amazing.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's like this the little detail of the sock that kind of shrugs down. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, I think there's really something to be said for specifically what you were talking about capturing those specific moments between a husband and a wife, right? You know, especially when I think back to some of the projects that I've done in the past, like some of them, it's like, it's not exactly that the company you're doing the work for is evil, but let's just say they're not saints either. And it's like when you're doing work like that, it's hard to put in your full effort. It's hard to put in like to go the 110%. And when you're doing something that you believe in, something that you can actually be proud of, it's way easier to kind of like bring your A game.
But isn't that half the fun with just being a creative? Because when someone asks you, what's your best project or your favorite project? It's like, do they mean the work or do they actually mean the experience? Because experience working with people is equally important. I mean, it can be something that you go like, eesh, this is not really my thing. But if working with the people is lovely, it's going to be one of your favorite projects nonetheless, just because you had that experience.
That's true.
So
that is
absolutely true. I have that experience with the project Alfie and I were on, and it was for financial institution. And it's not necessarily something that was super fun. Like even the output that we delivered was very like minimal and nothing visually to show. But I found it to be such a fun project, and the experience was really wonderful.
Definitely, yeah. That's true, and I think that sometimes I kind of like forget about that side of things because in my mind, like I remember the projects more often because I see the project. Like you know, you've got this little portfolio piece that can always remind you, but it requires you to actually think back to the experience to really remember whether or not. Well, some projects manage to remind you how terrible they were. But I think for the majority of projects, it's sort of like you need to think back to that experience to really remember.
Someone once asked me, like, is this all the work you have to show? And I was like, this is all the work that I'm showing that I would do again. There's stuff that I've done in the past where it's just like, I don't want to go down this road again.
Yes.
It's just like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of, there's in Fargo a scene where the antagonist says like, maps used to have signs that says, here be dragons. And I find remembering that there's dragons in certain projects, or just like, even if it's just like something really technical, like where you tell the client, like, listen, if we get to this stage, we really, really can't go back because it's going to be detrimental to the project and also the staff, and they make those decisions still. That's just not fun. It's honestly not fun for anyone involved in it, and it's also not suiting the project. Because then it's like something that was fun on a technical level becomes very like, I have to do this again. It's the fourth time I'm redoing this.
Yes.
And it's after you say like, we can't go back.
Yeah.
So,
And I think that's the thing that makes it the hardest. It's kind of like you see it coming, but you get hit by it anyway.
yeah. But I think I can maybe like tie everything together. But probably the reason why I like illustrating and animating equally is I grew up as a solo sport person. So I kind of knew my mistakes and how to adjust for them. And being able to do more than one field in the spectrum means like I can adjust for if I had to skip something out of a timeline. I know like, oh, that file, maybe there's something funky lurking, but I know why I made that decision because it's still in the process. Where if someone made funky decisions and it's not you, it's a bit harder to kind of enjoy it at the end because it's like, you don't know what their relationship is with the producer. You don't know, should I bug this person and be like, hey, I maybe need more stuff from you.
Yeah. So now you're freelancing, Jan, and it would actually be nice to hear, there's so many people now that want to jump on the freelancing bandwagon. And it seems really nice because they come to your Instagram page and they see all the amazing work that you're doing now. Because now that you're a freelancer, you actually get to do what you want to do. But there's also obviously a completely different side to it. When you and I initially met, you were telling me how, just the admin of like running a business. Can you maybe tell us like the day-to-day, like what is your, or even your week as a freelancer kind of look like and play out?
Well, so I can probably speak from the perspective where as a animator itself, just as a character animator, monthly, I know I usually book 10 days, if I'm lucky, a bit more, which means it covers a part of my cost. I have a certain amount of days that I need to book that covers cost and brings in a little bit of profit for sick leave and for all those kind of things.
For life.
Or even just, and also when you like basically don't get work, just to cover that kind of spectrum. So I usually aim to reach out to clients that I've worked with in the past first before I try to get new clients. So at the moment, I'm probably going to reach out to a couple of old clients, some new clients, put some new work out there. I've been fiddling more with illustration in my free time, kind of realizing I need to learn how to draw cars properly. That they don't all look like the same one, like those block-shaped ones. That people used to drive. So just generally running a business is like understanding what you need to make monthly to actually be okay. And also, if you're not getting work, where should you try and get work from? And it's just a grind daily because you can go like, I'm just going to focus on the work, or you can focus on the work and the business, or you can There's not really a right or wrong answer. I think it just depends on you as a person. If you go freelance, what the best is. You learn a lot of lessons quickly about money because, if you want to take out a loan with a bank,
it's
you
difficult
don't
as a
have
freelancer.
you don't have, because what happens in animation, for example, is most companies overseas works with a net 30, which means they pay you in 30 days from project completion. But if you kind of start at the project mid-month and you end mid-month, they're still going to pay you the end of the next month.
Yes.
So, and then you get net 60, which is 60 days, of course. And the worst is your net 90. Because that is 3 months. And if someone doesn't pay you in 3 months, it can cause a little bit of stress.
And I think I'm pretty sure the government is net 90. So like any tenders
wouldn't be
is a 90-day payment period, and then it's like, are you even going to get your money after 90 days?
Exactly.
And
like
especially when you think
never.
about net lifetime. But the thing that's sad about that is, especially I think it's especially evident in the construction space, is that some businesses literally go under because the government owes them money and doesn't pay them.
Yeah, no, definitely. The fact that, because as a freelancer, unless you're doing a lot of direct to client, you're more just a hired gun. So the ramifications if someone doesn't pay you or pay you on time, it's quite massive, because you kind of you what happens is you trade your money for their money.
Yeah, sure.
How do you mean?
So let's say I have my base rate fee, and theirs is a bit higher. I know, like, okay, cool. Their day rate is something that has a profit worked in there. And if I'm taking on their work, I'm saying like, okay, cool, I'm spending my money to do your project.
Yes.
And once you get your money, you pay me. Unless you do 50%, which it works for a lot of companies to ask them 50% upfront, but some of them are just adamant they do a 30-day structure. You can kick and scream and fight, but that's how they work, because they have their own internal systems and stuff. So
I guess that's something to be said as well, right? For if you want to be a freelancer and you specifically want to work with brands as well, not just individuals or small companies, is that you can't necessarily always set the terms of engagement that you want, or the any of those rules. You kind of have to be very flexible to the brand or the organization that you want to work with, if you do want to.
Yeah, and also realizing that the biggest thing that I think most creatives don't understand is, let's take a big business, I mentioned Amazon earlier, but let's say Amazon. There's so many facets of that business running that to make money, that your project is not the most important thing at the end of the day. For you, it's the most important thing, because you're like, I'm doing this for money, but it's like all those things need to go through HR. They probably need to be vetted by a lot of different heads. So the fact that those people probably have other things on their plate as well. So if they miss details, you can't really be a child and throw your toys around, because you're working for a big company. So I always like when it's a bit smaller, because then you might be able to talk to the person directly and have a rapport with them. The funniest I had recently is a client tell me that they picked up their child from daycare and they had a cough, so they threw their back out due to coughing and picking up their child. So at the same time, so now they're like on Valium for a couple of days.
Hectic.
So I mean, just getting to that point where you can connect to someone as a person. You're not just like this cool, you're a cog in the machine, and that's it. It's like on that level, it's quite nice because then you can actually be like. I think it's also as a business owner is having boundaries. It's like I learned very hard, especially with South Africans, to never send your number to someone. Doesn't matter how they communicate or think it's cool to communicate, because that is your private number, unless you have a different cell phone that you work business hours on. But some people don't understand that when you say, I work from 9 till 6 or 8 till 5 or whatever your business times are, that's business times. If you're sitting there at 10 o'clock at night and you saw something cool, doesn't mean I want to see that at 10 o'clock at night when I'm spending time with my family, right? So, yeah. I think it's difficult, especially in the age we're in, where we're all already overstimulated. I've kind of said I can't go in on Instagram after a certain hour because then I would just want to come back into my studio and create stuff. So I have to set those own boundaries for myself. People can also set boundaries where, that's just one thing I've started implementing. It's like no cell phone numbers.
And one of the interesting things that I'm starting to get suspicious about is I'm starting to think one of the biggest problems or one of the biggest causes for the starving artist narrative is not because art is not profitable. It's because of these things that you're talking about, like these tiny little things that either make your each working day a little bit more pleasurable or a little bit harder. And if you don't get those things right, they just slowly stack up until you hate your life, basically.
Or you're just burned
Why
out.
are you only suspicious of that now, Alfie?
Well, I guess the starving artist narrative has been around for so long that it's like I've been trying to get to the bottom of it. It's like, what is the thing that actually makes creative people fall into this trap where even if they're good at their work, they struggle so much to actually monetize it and be remunerated fairly. And more I'm starting to think it's got nothing to do with the creative discipline or even being creative.
I think it's also we're probably a bit people pleasing.
Boundaries.
Where it's like, you guys probably have this as well, where you work with a client and they don't send their logo, but they want their logo in the thing. So most people will actually go the extra mile and go and retrace that logo or do something to that extent, because that logo needs to be vector and it needs to be perfect in their thing. Where from day one, if it's just like, if you don't send me a logo, I'm just going to put a white PNG in there. Your logo, if we're doing a cool animation, it's just going to be a white thing with your logo, because the agreement is like, you send me your logo, I put it in there. If I already sourced your logo from the internet, like I've already gone above and beyond actually what we should have been doing. And I think it's just like setting those boundaries from the start. I had a guy sit next to me at Amazon with the most amazing expressed dissatisfaction rate, because every single client you interact with can actually say you solved their problem or not. And all of us got taught how to soft skill it and say, I cannot, or you can't use words like not, you should say, I hear your problem. However, I can do this for you instead of what you're asking. Right?
I can't.
So you always divert it and stuff. And a lot of people feel like you're wasting their time by trying to be overly nice with, I can't really help you, but I can do this for you, instead of just being like, I can't help you. No, sorry. So this dude just always said no, and he always said he can't do certain things, and all the customers loved it. And I kind of took that as my mantra in life, where it's like, just say no the first time you want to say no. Because
need to get that
means like, no, but it's like, that means that later on it's not a surprise, because it always gets to that breaking point where the bad day, where someone pushed you over the edge, and then you slightly snarking it in an email because it's like, can't you understand? I've been giving you so much extra, but you never say no. That's not the client's fault. That's the person, the creative's fault.
Boundaries.
So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that is very true. And I think we're somewhat coming to the closing stages of this discussion. But one of the things that I think would be pretty interesting before we get there is if you could kind of like wave a wand and make a wish and have your ideal client appear and kind of give you a call tomorrow morning. Do you have an idea of what that looks like? Are there any brands specifically that you would like to engage with? Are there any types of projects that you've been hoping and waiting for?
Plant the seeds.
So I'm trying to slowly learn how to do editorial illustration more. So that's not going to happen for the foreseeable future, especially.
You'd be surprised.
Oh, you never know. Maybe if I put out the work and actually go back on that route of doing what I'm supposed to be doing, not saying I'm doing it, then that could happen. But I'm just really keen to do cool website stuff where it's just like banners and cool campaigns. Like, I mean, I'll do stuff for McDonald's. I don't really have that thing where it's like the dream client. The dream client is just someone that's nice. Be a dick. That's all you kind of want.
Yeah, that's a very good requirement for. Yeah, it's very sensible. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, we've all dealt with home affairs and stuff like that. Doesn't matter who you are. You can kick. You can wave your arms around. Nothing's gonna happen. So that's kind of how I see life. It's like you treat people as a human being, and you hope that they do the same. It's like, but once again, if it's 10 o'clock at night and you want something done, you might reach an empty desk. Or you might reach someone that's like just like, not now.
No.
Okay. So, cool. Yeah, I would say like there's not really a dream client. I would love to do more illustration at the moment and animate those illustrations. But other than that, just nice.
Well, we'll keep following you and kind of watch and see if you're going to be doing the work that you should be doing, and if there's going to be some editorial stuff and website stuff. It would also be nice to see the piece eventually being shared that you chatted about earlier about the baby stroller. Would that ever, once it's out, it will be made public?
I think it's out. Okay. I just don't know if they can share it.
Okay, well,
I can say it's from the Netherlands.
Okay.
So cool baby stroller companies in the Netherlands.
Okay,
we'll search that.
Nice. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean, like, I've done that recently, which was really nice. I did a thing for a Jewish camp, which was kind of cool. I mean,
we'll definitely share some of your work because I think it's 100% worth sharing. It's really fun to just kind of scroll through and look through everything. On that note, if people do want to reach out to you personally because I want to work with you, where would be the best place for them to find you?
Probably via email because DMs can be kind of
messy.
There's a lot of people that, dude, I'm a rapper and I have this new song and I just need an animated music video.
Specific.
No, but it's always like that. My new single is popping soon, and you're like, what the hell does that mean? So that's why I'm like, rather email. It's a bit not official. Those boundaries, once again, like, let's start it properly. Let's set up a call. Because my process is usually I just always start a thing of an email and then ask a couple of questions, get on a call, figure out what the best solution is. Yeah, coming from an animation background, I've been able to do a lot of different styles of work, luckily. So it's always that thing of figuring out what's the best thing for budget for them. Because, I have a massive gripe when people make a client's project about them and not the client. Because it's always like, this is what I want to do. And it's like, but does the client want that? So I always try to keep that in mind, that it's their money and their project. I'm just the lucky person that usually gets to work on it. So
amazing.
All right. Well, we'll definitely post the website link and also share your Instagram handle if you guys want to go follow him already. It's Jan Oberholzer, Jan.Oberholzer on Instagram. And we'll share all of those. But Jan, it's been really nice, and it's been equally lovely just watching your work and scrolling through the feeds. And please post some more. It would be nice to see some more stuff.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me, guys. Sorry that I'm like sitting in the dark, but this is South Africa.
We've had so much worse.
I'm kind of surprised, but there's like 3 dogs behind me sleeping, and they're all like super quiet.
I was
well
shocked.
behaved.
Yeah, very well behaved. They all deserve a treat. Just saying.
Well, the Great Dane like got into pick and pay delivery today, so she had a fair amount of apples, and also she had some frozen peas, which I can't imagine are like no. So yeah, and some plastic, I think.
Oh no.
Wow.
No, it's just she chews everything. She's a puppy, so not fun.
Okay.
So next time I speak to you guys, if I'm grayer, you know why? It's not the word, it's the dog.
Okay.
Definitely. But Jan, thank you so much for giving of your time with us and sharing with our audience. I'm sure they appreciate it.
Yeah.
And to everybody listening,
sorry, I'm a bit cynical. It's been 10 years in the industry in South Africa.
Yeah, no, you need to hear every side of the story. So we do appreciate you being willing to share. And everybody 100%. Listening, thank you very much. And we will be back next week. Have a good one, guys. Cheers.
See you soon.
Cheers, guys.